Okay, so today we're going to talk about Gen AI and learning and how it can be a useful study tool, and if it can be, how it can be. Obviously, it's worth pointing out that we're discussing the role of Gen AI as a learning tool in general, and you should obviously check guidance on using Gen AI within your specific context, particularly assessment. So, Stefan, could you start off by telling us a bit about what you've observed about how Gen AI is sometimes used and whether you think this is helpful or not?
Yeah, hello. So I'm Stefan Bleeck, professor of hearing science. I've been teaching at university for more than 20 years now. And as probably almost everybody out there, I am using AI, generative AI, on a daily basis. And I'm fascinated with the possibilities. And I see also my students use it on a daily basis. And there are certain dangers and there are opportunities. And it is important early on to identify what we should and what we should not do. Problem is that students obviously learn to rely on AI as a cognitive support structure for them. Using it in a university context is really easy because the AI is, because of its foundation on writing and having all of the access to all of the information in the world, is obviously really good at integrating literature, finding writing from everywhere in the world, brainstorming, connecting different ideas from different areas, being even creative to some degree of creating novel ideas, research questions, and then proposing how to solve them. That is really very effective and desirable for students to do. And the problem with that, obviously, is that if students do that, they never learn how to do these things without the AI. So they keep more and more relying in their cognitive thinking on asking AI and then believing the output. We all know of the problems with AI generating wrong or hallucinated content, which is obviously getting better for the next time. So we're still in the transition phase here, but the problem that we cannot oversee and cannot overlook at the moment is that if students rely too much on writing and on thinking, then their own cognitive abilities will not develop in the way that we need them to develop, because we, certainly in our Western world, put a high emphasis on individual and critical thinking skills, and also on writing these thoughts down and communicating by writing. How can generative AI be very positive in terms of critical thinking skills for individuals? And that is a methodology that I want to introduce, which is called the Socratic friend, which basically means that the AI is not used to ask for answers, but is used to ask for questions. Something that I use often, I tell my children to use as well. And it can be very simple, of saying to the generative AI, ask me 5 questions about this text and assess my answers. And if there are flaws in my answer, then help me to understand the material better. The issue with that is it's not that simple. Nothing is ever that simple in generative AI, because the fallacies in generative AI is all about the prompt and the prompting and the art of prompting, because generative AI is programmed fundamentally to agree with people, to be helpful, to be explaining, and to support the learner, because it's not made for learning, it's made for giving answers. So it has to be stopped doing that. And it is possible to do that, but it requires a whole range of instructions to the AI that basically change its psychology from being a helpful person to being a critical person. I say person, sorry. It's not a person, a robot. But it must be told to never give out the answer. Under no circumstances will they give the final answer or write the code. But they will ask one question at a time, a targeted question about the subject at hand. And not if you do that just naively, it will just pop out 10 questions, and then you're stuffed. So you need to do that one by one, and it will not critically congratulate and agree with the what's the English word for that, sycophancy, because many AIs are programmed to be sycophantic. And you can stop that by using the right prompting, and to be told that they should be rather critical. And that doesn't mean critical as in criticize the answer of saying you did a bad job. It can be supportive, but it should not agree if it is wrong. And that is something that is in the art of prompting. So there needs to be a whole set of prompts. So many AIs, you can actually upload or save a set of prompts that they always act upon. And that should be set as the standard, basically, for every university student, to be critical, to be a friend and not a tutor, a critical tutor, but not to be only trying to be helpful. So rather than giving out the answer immediately, always do a cross check. What does the person actually understand?
It's interesting what you say about, you've got to ask it one question at a time, but otherwise you get 10, and they're not necessarily 10 helpful questions, but one at a time. And there really are certain prompts that you can actually, those types of prompts are helpful and you can use them each time.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, how have you developed, that understanding? And could you give us a few more examples of those prompts that you think would be helpful to university students or, staff like yourself?
Yeah. So from my own experience, I mean, I've used AI for a year or something like that, and have stumbled through and have used it all the wrong ways initially, certainly. And as an example of how I certainly use it every day now, is to help me understand complex papers. So there are a billion and one paper that I want to read, and I haven't got the time because it takes me an afternoon to read one paper. AI enables me to read a paper in an hour, and it does that by certainly summarizing and explaining it to me, because the language, let's be frank, the language of AI is usually vastly improvement on the language of writers. So it is easier to understand. But the critical point comes afterwards, not just understanding, because that's passive, but active. Now, in the second stage is the critical thinking on the critical friend coming in, namely where I asked the AI to ask me questions to make sure that I actually understood the paper. So that figure 3 shows the relationship between variable A and variable B. And the AI then will ask me, for example, what is the consequence? What is the limitations of that? What is the consequence? And well, these are already 3 questions. What are the conclusions of that? So that means that I actually, rather than just passively soaking up information, it turns my brain on, and I then have to think for a few minutes about each of these answers, going back to the paper, reading it again, and then really understanding, and I didn't understand it the first time around because I only read it, but I haven't really thought about it. And
Mm.
that's something that is absolutely fascinating because it makes me 5 times more efficient in understanding the important information in a paper, because for me 90% of the paper is usually not important. I don't need to understand everything. I just need to understand the bits that are relevant for my own research. And in that, AI is absolutely useful. There's a little danger involved in that, though, while we're here, because every student now has a perfect tutor at their hand. And on the one hand, I feel really jealous. If I grew up now and had this tutor, I could learn so much faster, I have the feeling, because the tutor knows exactly at which stage the student is and which what knowledge should be, it's appropriate at what level, and feeds it at the right time. So there certainly is now a perfect tutor for every child. But that also means that students do never or less often solve problems together. So
Mm.
the communication in that suffers, because if students prefer to go to their AI because it's useful, it's helpful, it's agreeing with them, and it's generally a friend, they rather do that than go to their professor, or even to talk to their friends, because it might be embarrassing to um, admit that you don't know something. And with the AI, it never is.
Mm.
And so every plus side I come up here has a negative attached to it, that we don't know what the consequences in future actually will be when students completely learn differently, and how their brains develop to, yeah, maybe in a different way to think critically. The way that we say we think critically might not exist in the same way as we're now saying the way to write an essay might disappear, that the art of writing essays, because nobody will have to write essays anymore. Nobody will have to do a literature review anymore, because AI is much better at finding literature on the internet than I am. But the thinking barrier is what I'm worried about, that people do not learn anymore, or they learn to rely, and I see it with myself as well. I learn to rely on AI rather than thinking myself.
Mm.
And the brain is wired up to use tools like that. And there is an argument made by Silicon Valley, certainly, that that is similar to the development of the pocket calculator. That has led to a complete different kind of math that was developed, because people didn't need to think about calculations anymore and can start thinking about math more. So maybe there is a kind of thinking ahead where we are curating, where we're integrating, where our taste matters more, and we're basically working a lot more with the output of AI. But this is highly speculative, and I don't know if that's going to happen, or if that's positive, or if that is very negative. I have no idea. What we do know
Mm.
is that AI does change the brain, that people become dependent on it quickly. And I had 55 years of thinking for myself, and even I feel it a little bit on myself. But somebody who grows up now and never has the well, never has to think only for themselves without having their personal tutor as an option, will potentially never be self-assured to rely on their own thinking process.
Mm.
And that is really dangerous. I don't have the solution for that.
No, but that would be impressive if you did. I mean, it's interesting, just find it kind of interests me what you're saying about reliance, and also a bit about the speed, actually. So you often think about things like, well, many things in our society, but I think probably Gen AI comes into us, but going faster, quicker, do more, get the answer quicker. Whereas actually the way you're describing using it is actually a slowing down to
Mm.
encourage the deeper thinking, isn't it? So
Mhm.
perhaps
Yeah.
in the tying not to get over reliant, You know, are
Yes.
you also saying it's that deliberate choice, as with many things in life, deep thinking doesn't happen at we can't be doing that super
Yeah.
fast. So if it takes you an afternoon to read a paper and really understand it, better to do that than to try and have a list of 30 papers you claim to have read and understood but you haven't.
Yeah. Reading is not understanding. Everybody who works in that area knows that. I can read 20 papers in an afternoon, the abstracts. That doesn't mean that I understand them. That means I have some information about what people have done in their work. That doesn't mean that I have understood it, certainly not critically, in the sense that I can compare, integrate the knowledge, or maybe even critique it in finding gaps and shortcomings. AI can help me with that. So AI can create an environment in which, rather than just reading, it prompts as well. And so there is a loop. And so the reading becomes understanding easier using AI. That I discover for myself and use for myself every day, and I find that wonderful. So the deep learning is facilitated by AI if it is used in the right way. So
Yes.
stop asking it for solutions, but asking it for questions, for testing. Let it find out what you do not know